Hey, how's it going everyone? This is YLAM here. In today's video, we're going to be covering the wireless Go mic from Rode. This is their new lavalier mic and it comes in at a great price point of $200. Now in this review, I'm not going to be doing the traditional reviews on YouTube because you've probably watched it a couple of times already before getting onto this video. I'm going to go ahead and jump into discussion points on what you really want to know before actually buying this product. The first thing that I want to say is I bought the batch 2 version of the wireless mic Go. In batch 1, they had a lot of issues with the wind muff just popping off very easily. But as you can see in the batch 2, it actually takes a decent bit of strength in order to actually pop this off. So if you had reluctance buying into the wireless mic Go because of the wind muff popping off super easily, it has been fixed and it seems to be a very good solution and I don't have any issues with it. You're going to see it in some of the earlier YouTube videos in which this was an issue. The second item that I want to talk about is that because these have an internal battery, in other words, the lithium ion battery is built in rather than some of the other lavalier mics like this one in which it has AA batteries, so I can change them out anytime that I want. This means that these Rode mics have a finite lifespan. In other words, when these lithium ion batteries go out or when they die off, or when they just can't hold a reasonable charge for the amount of time that you want to record with, they're going to be useless to you and you're going to have to replace them. So I have a lot of experience with lithium ion batteries because of the drone work that I do, and all of them use lithium ion batteries. And what I can tell you is that most of these batteries, they will function at 100% for the first 100 charges. So in other words, every single time you plug it into the charger, that is one cycle, or that's one charge. And after about 100 cycles, the battery performance starts to degrade very slowly. Now, if you keep these topped off all the time, it actually takes less time to get to that 100 cycles. In other words, most lithium ion batteries, they don't want to be topped off. They don't always want to be at 100% charge. In other words, if you actually want to store these for a short period of time of unuse, say about a week, you actually want to keep them at about 50% battery charge. That is their normal state in which the battery will not deteriorate. At 100% battery charge, the internals of the lithium ion battery actually starts to deteriorate because it's at full capacity, and that's what happens with lithium ion batteries. So it's much better to have them at storage charge, which is around 3.8 volts per cell, which is around 40 to 50% battery life for most of these units. So because I know the performance is going to start deteriorating at about 100 cycles, with usually a max lifespan of about 500 cycles, I can actually plan on how I want to use these lavalier mics to maximize the longevity of these lavalier mics. So for me, at a full battery charge, I can probably go an entire week before having to charge them again. In other words, I'm not going to be topping off this battery every chance I get. And for my calculations, I probably only need to charge these lavalier mics once or twice a week. So if I'm doing the math, that means in about 2 years, I'm going to get to my first 100 cycles, or at least that's my target. Obviously, if I have a need to top off these batteries because I'm doing something important and I'm using these lavalier mics, I'm going to go ahead and do so. But I do want to do everything that I can to make these lavaliers last as long as possible, which means I'm going to be keeping track of when I actually charge these lavalier mics. The next item that I do want to discuss is the internal mic, which I'm using right now for this video. So you might hear some handling noise, but it is very convenient that it's actually built into the unit itself, which means that it's going to be great for rapid deployment, but there's going to be a lot of use cases where this is not going to be very useful. Now, Rode did think about this, so there is a 3.5 millimeter jack right here, so you can actually use a traditional lav, but that is something that you really have to consider. You almost need a collared shirt like this in order to actually connect it on. If you're using regular t-shirts, you might actually have issues connecting this close to you to where you can actually pick up really good volume. So this is something that you really have to think about. Is this internal mic going to be useful for your needs? It is kind of a unique setup. It is kind of nice in my opinion. So this is definitely something that you have to plan accordingly, because if you do have to buy a wireless lav, these things are not cheap. They're usually around at least a minimum of $100 to buy a good set of these, which would make these Rode mics cost similar to the Sennheisers that are currently out right now. So there is a couple of items that I quickly want to talk about. First amongst which is that when you actually mount it onto a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, this actually mounts very comfortably and it doesn't move around a lot. I was actually worried that this would be too easy to actually shake off from the top of a camera, but after putting it on and using it for a little bit, I have no concerns about that anymore. It's very form-fitting and it snugs on very tightly, and I have had no issues with that at all. Now, one thing that you do have to worry about is that if you look right here, it does stick out from the back of the camera quite a bit. So in other words, if you actually want to use your eye cup to take pictures while this is on, you might have a little bit of trouble because of how far back this actually comes out. As you can see from this vantage point, it does stick out the back quite a bit. The next thing that I want to talk about is the dead cat or the wind muff up here. It does a very good job. Unfortunately, it's also quite large compared to the rest of the body. I really wish that they actually had two options. This one right here, which is high wind resistance, and they actually gave us another one that's a little bit more minimalistic that kind of just fits right over the top for like really light wind noise. That way it's a little bit easier to conceal, especially if you're just going to be clipping it onto the outer clothing, because it does look a little bit weird and it does kind of attract the eye when somebody has this on. So these are my quick takeaways about this lavalier system. I definitely like using lavalier systems because they're so highly portable and they're really easy to use, and I'm really glad I have another set here in the studio that I can use because it's really nice to be able to move around with these things. Now, if you have any further questions or any comments that you want me to answer, go ahead and leave them below. Anyhow, that's all I have. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.